Hi, I'm the True Wise Gamer, giving off my vast knowledge so you may understand games a bit better. So last time I did Sleeping Dogs, and called it boring because, well, it was a boring slog that couldn't match a game series that was, well, not known at the time, was able to become a series that a lot of people respect nowadays. That being the Ryagagotoku games, or the Yakuza games over here, or Like a Dragon, but whatever, we don't care anymore. Sadly, I wasn't one of those people who knew about the series before the release of Zero. Well, sorta, but another time perhaps. In fact, when I was younger, I was always waiting for the game to actually drop in price for a long while, and it never happened for a while. However, there's one game on the shelf that was there and was far cheaper. That being Yakuza Kiwami, which I immediately bought because, again, was half the price of what Yakuza 0 was at the time at full price. I actually had literally no idea at the time it was a remake of the original game, but I didn't really care at the time, and really, it's a version that not a lot of people talk about. Though I don't particularly blame those people because for the most part, the original has some qualities that make it really good. In fact, that's kind of the tragedy of remasters or remakes. They have to be better than the actual original game in every freaking way. You know, the people who think that the original is always superior no matter what. Or just be like, oh, the remake was better, you know, those elitist people. And honestly, it kind of was a good idea that I did that because it left me with a better impression of the game than if I did play Zero, then played Kiwami. To go back to Zero for a moment, Kiwami is actually based on a lot of reused assets from the series, which the series does a lot of time, and they really did do that a lot for the remake of the first game. I mean, the series has reused a lot of assets throughout the series. I mean, like, you can still see some of the original animations from those first games still being used in the games nowadays. Heck, the town of Kamurocho has barely ever changed that much, and when it does, it's actually quite interesting to see how those changes evolve the city and how it changes over the timeline. But while I mention that, well, that's mostly because of, well, as I mentioned, this game reuses a lot of assets. And sometimes it doesn't do it so well, but we'll get into that when we get into that. In fact, Zero is the basis for Kiwami, which brings in a lot of its problems as well, but again, we'll get into that as we go along. Oh yeah, this is something I did want to talk about the original for a moment. You see, back in the day, a lot of games had their own little website so that you can learn about the game, maybe want to see if you want to try it. Well, you see, I decided for laughs to actually go to the website. And let me tell you, don't go there. To trust me on this, you don't want to see it. I promise you, it's nothing good. But this intro has gone on long enough, so let us begin the Legend of the Dragon of Kamurocho in Yakuza Kiwami. If you're wondering why I'm calling him that, I'll get into that, I promise. There's a good reason. The game begins on a stormy night with Kiryu, our main protagonist, over the dead body of its boss, as he picks up the ring on the ground with the name Yumi on it. We flash back to properly introduce Kiryu, and he's actually pretty good right now. He's a rising star in the world of the Yakuza. He's even about to start his own family in the Tojo clan. I promise I'll explain those turns in a bit. So, life is looking pretty good, as he plans to celebrate with his Kodai, or Yakuza brother, Nishikiyama, with also Yumi, a childhood friend where Nishikiyama, Kiryu, and Yumi all were raised in the orphanage of Sunflower. After the party, he decides to go to his boss/father figure, Kazuma. However, we then learn while there, Dojima, his actual boss, kidnapped Yumi and plans to do nasty stuff with her. You see why I didn't want to call him the Dragon of Dojima? And Nishikiyama actually was trying to chase them, trying to make sure that Yumi stayed safe, since they both actually really love her. Kazuma tries to keep Kiryu from going, but Kiryu can't help himself and goes after them. But he's already too late. Dojima is dead, with Nishikiyama doing the deed. This is actually pretty bad because in the Yakuza world, to kill your boss is like the biggest no-no. It's like, you do that, you're fucked. You better die or just hope nobody ever finds you again. So Kiryu, out of desperation and love for them both, tells Nishiki to take Yumi, who's catatonic at this point because again, she was almost molested and barely got out of there. And also maybe the prologue, but I don't think that's canon. Again, It's a reason why I do not like Dojima, or why the fuck they keep calling him the Dragon of Dojima. Nishiki agrees, though not under the right terms, and will grow to regret this moment. Kiryu takes the fall, but nobody really cares on why he did it, it's just that it happens and he gets sentenced to prison. And this is where the strange things begin to happen. You see, instead of Kiryu being kicked out, he's actually expelled, which is really important for later because of a certain plot point, and also meaning that just a full expulsion just would have meant, no, you can't even do illegal shit anymore. We see you near us, we're killing you. It gets even weirder as Yumi disappears and nobody knows what exactly happened to her. More strange things begin to happen, like a hit in prison, even though it was done by Sarah, the same person who kicked him out of the Yakuza. As the 10 billion that the Tojo have, it's just gone. Nobody knows exactly how it happened, and the only reason why they even know is because Nishiki, who's the head of his own family now, found out through the help of someone named Torada from the Omni Alliance, which is some rival group to the Tojo. Again, I'll elaborate later. This event causes chaos in the Tojo. It soon gets even more crazy with somehow Sarah, the chairman of the Tojo, being killed. Kazuma sent him this letter to tell him about what was happening and to meet him at a place called Stardust. Which, I noticed in a lot of my notes that I didn't actually mention Stardust. That's mostly because it's more of a tertiary place where it's something that reappears in the series, but it never really matters that much. And that's not to say that the characters who are there aren't important, they are, it's just that, in the grand scheme of things, they're minor players. However, due to the death of the chairman, Kazuma can't go to Stardust until after the funeral. For some strange reason, Kiryu decides to just, go there instead of just waiting. Though then again, the games usually always make a point to make sure that people know that Kiryu is a bit bullheaded. He'll do whatever he wants, regardless of even the consequences. And there will be some consequences for this action. When he gets there, Kazuma tries to explain some things and says that Yumi is somehow involved in all this. However, before he can actually elaborate on what's happening, he gets shot and Kiryu is blamed for him being shot. Kiryu barely escapes with the help of Date, the detective we saw at the beginning who was interrogating him. Date did all this just to figure out what the heck is going on, and with the help of Kiryu, he thinks he can do that. So in a weird way, it's up to Kiryu to figure out what the hell is going on with the 10 billion yen, Yumi, and the whole conspiracy. I know that explanation went on for a while, and I apologize. It's just hard to really concisely tell you everything you needed to know, because there are a lot of moving parts, and there are a lot of things that are minor but too important not to mention. Like, I didn't mention Shinji all that much, because while he is important, he's not important to getting the idea of what's happening. And to elaborate, basically he goes into hiding with Kazuma to just keep him safe. And when I say there are a lot of moving parts, I mean it. And ironically enough, this will be the simplest plot in the entire series, because later on, it will get way more confusing. However, that's not to say it's bad. On the contrary, it's actually pretty damn good overall. It does a good job of making sure that the mystery is being built up while revealing stuff time to time, with the characters being, characters and being interesting to watch. Though that does mean that sometimes the plot will just have to kind of stop for a moment and actually dump a lot of info on you, just so that you're either knowing what's going to happen next, or just so that it can remind the player, because again, they can't really know what you're doing, and it could have been a while before you actually remember this plot point, or these characters, or again, this moment. Though it's kind of weird that I say that, is that Kiwami and the next game will introduce two characters who don't even matter to the plot. Like, I was genuinely confused on why they're here. Are they supposed to be a meta joke? I'm really not sure. And one of the biggest problems that I had with the game's plot was that in the middle of it all, when things are about to ramp up, it then throws a back-to-back side plots that, while they build the overall narrative of these characters, don't actually advance the main plot. I'm referring to the subplot of both the Florist and Date's children. Like, while they are well done and do their job very nicely, they again stop the more interesting plot at the moment, and it's just really jarring. And luckily, the series would at least bother to come back to them every so often, seeing how they advance over time, throughout the entire series, which is really interesting at times, plus also more weave these sort of subplots into the plot a little better. And really, the more egregious time it ever does this sort of thing again is in Yakuza 3, but we'll get to that another time. Heck, the only reason why I mention it is because, well, it's the only real big complaint I have with the game's overall narrative. Because for the most part, it's really well written and does enough to make you care about the characters that you're seeing. For example, Kiryu is just a great character overall. Sure, throughout most of the game he's very stoic, but that doesn't mean he doesn't react to the situations around him. He just likes to be more reserved due to his own history. Hell, he can be pretty expressive when doing sub-stories where he's completely, at times, unsure how to handle people's weird oddities. This is where I want to mention something that I think will help you understand my thought processes at times. See, in my GOD review, I got annoyed at times at the game for its weird moments, because they weren't balanced well at all. It kind of prevents me from getting my emotional investment in, because when you're weird all the time, I can't tell if you're being funny or you're being serious at times. And it just becomes this sort of conflicting thing where you want me to feel both at the same time. Like, here's the thing. Where is your base normal? You know what I mean? Once you have that, you can do any weird shit you want. But as long as you have a basis of what is weird and what is not weird, you can do whatever you want. Because now we know how to feel at most times. Because when that is a thing, the audience is more willing to engage with it, either through laughter, through the comedy of it all, or the seriousness of it all, with the understanding that, sure, this is weird, but everything makes sense, which I feel GOD doesn't do well at all. Here, on the other hand, when something goes weird, it's weird, and thus Kiryu reacts to it accordingly, and stays in character to the weirdness. It creates far more interesting moments than just, wow, that was weird. It tells an actual story with it, rather than being a thing that just happened. Though to be clear, not every sub-story is weird. That's more of a thing for the later games, but some of them were in here still. But in any case, some of them are just normal base sub-stories. Most of them are just Kiryu either helping someone or getting pulled into their troubles as well. It's fun when the weirdness does happen, but they do still tell nice stories. Though I won't lie, a good chunk of them are a bit bland, though that was because, again, a lot of them are from the originals, and you can really tell which ones were made for this game, or were just in the original, because they're really that easy to tell. They are still enjoyable, and just some of them don't translate easily that well. See, a lot of quests in the original game were time sensitive, so they were missable and could be only finished at certain points. They luckily didn't keep that in, which, for the record, I just hate that sort of thing. I hate missable stuff, so I'm glad it's not a thing here. They did keep a good chunk of them here, but some of them were just outright removed. And again, not to say they were bad, just built for a different time and place and moved here. However, there is a thing they did add, and that was a bad idea, sort of. We'll need to talk about combat now. Okay, so remember how I mentioned at the beginning, the remake is basically based on Zero? Well, I didn't just mean that in engine, but I mean in a lot of other ways. See, in Zero, combat had 3 modes, which were fitted to be in that game. However, here it's translated here with little changes, but we will get into that. Essentially, these modes were basically a light, medium, heavy form. Rush style, or your boxer form, is a very get in, get out form. It's all about dealing damage quickly, and then once you're done or need to get out, dodge the heck out. You then have beast form, which I rarely use, but more in a bit. It's basically the opposite of that, being a very slow but very powerful form. It can barely dodge or even move. But when it hits, it hits. Heck, you can even actually bring an object that could be in battle and slam him into foes, dealing a lot of damage. And ironically, it will be the way you'll deal damage with this form. But again, I'll explain in a bit. Then, you have Brawler, which is your basic form. Or, for lack of a better term, your basic Yakuza form, for lack of a better term. It's your all-rounder. It's decent in most situations. It's never bad, it's just overall fine. Over time, through battles and activities, they give you XP. You can give yourself more abilities over time with this XP, like gaining a guard effect that helps the block after it's being shattered or needed to do it again, and gaining heat over time, or heck, a new heat move. Let's actually talk about the heat bar for a moment. The heat bar is a minor mechanic, but an important one too. You see, as you keep battling and keep doing damage, or a lot of other things, but it depends on the form itself, you gain heat, which basically makes you a little stronger. And once you have a full bar, or at least enough to actually do something, you can perform a heat move, which will be guaranteed damage. However, one of the additions to this game where I'm both conflicted on is basically repeat heat moves, where basically the more you use a heat move of the same type, the more it will actually get weaker. So the idea is to actually make you, use other heat moves. In battle with normal enemies, it's actually fine, but against bosses, it's actually quite annoying because, again, heat moves are a good way to deal damage. However, it does make sure that players aren't going to cheat through battle with heat moves. Though then again, that can still happen, as we'll get into in a bit. But in any case, the heat moves are a good idea regardless, and were always fun to do. There are a lot of heat moves, and as the series goes on, you'll see a lot more of them. However, we need to go back to the XP system, since again, that's actually how you'll gain more abilities or more heat. And where the big problem of the game begins to happen. You see, I haven't actually mentioned the final style, that being the Dragon Up Kamurocho, which is your strongest form. Potentially. This is where the new stuff for Kiwami comes in. See, Majima, who I've actually not explained, my apologies, is a character in the series who became fan favorite after, a long time, but Zero really pushed him up to the edge. But in any case, basically, after taking a crack at Kiryu after he got out of prison, and after the fight, which you can actually win, but it's a little more tricky, but in any case, after fighting you, he realizes that, yeah, you're not back at form. In fact, you're actually weaker than you were beforehand. So his idea is to fight Kiryu as much as he can, so that Kiryu will get back to where he was, if not stronger. And this is where a lot of people agree where Kiwami drops the ball hard. For you see, this system is just very annoying since it requires you to fight Majima at least, and I say at least, over 30 times just to max out Dragon of Kamurocho stat. And mind you, he does have its 4 different fighting forms from Zero. However, that doesn't change the fact that you're still fighting him and getting in the way of what you're doing. It doesn't help with it requiring you to fight certain types of Majima, who might spawn in. Yes, this shit gets RNG at times, and your only recourse is to reset every time till you get the one you want. And that's not even getting into the activities that you need to do just to progress it. And that could include stuff that you give no toss about, like Pocket Circuit, which is still fun, but it's just a repeat of Zero with its own plot, so I'm a little mixed on it, but in any case, it's still good. It's just that players might not ever want to touch that. Though speaking on Pocket Circuit Fighter, we'll need to talk about him in a moment. Yes, seriously, it's important that I talk about him because of something else, I promise. Or you have to do Mezzo King, which is basically the Dinosaur King arcade game, but it's with... Actually, I have no idea what the hell do we call these. What are furries for bugs? Insectoids? Yeah, perfect. Insectoid women. Yep, and I was honestly more shocked if anything because, again, it's just Dinosaur King with this. And I had to repeat, you will have to likely do something that you would just never want to do on your own. But that does beg the question of, what was even the purpose of this? Well, if I had to hazard a guess, it's because of the XP system. It's basically broken. Allow me to explain. Because you see, the game's difficulty is a bit of an odd curve. One of the issues with the game is just how XP is given in general. As I mentioned, doing stuff gives you XP. However, the issue is that the game doesn't balance this XP at all. Because you see, most fights might give you at least one level, if almost to it, and mind you, these levels are stacked until you can actually put them into the spear grid. However, they don't scale over time or at least balance out more. Like, to give you an example, the first ring gives you 1 level per orb. Okay, cool. Then you need 3 levels to get 1 orb. Then 10, then 50, Then finally, 85. Yeah, again, most things won't even give you that much XP with maybe a few side quests giving you some. But otherwise, that's it. And really, the only thing that give up good XP are bosses and Majima. See where I'm going with this? Majima feels like a band-aid to the XP problem. I can only guess why they did it is just because of that. Because the more you fight him, the more XP he begins to reward out to you. Thus, over time, you gain a lot of XP. And as I mentioned before, this has a knock-on effect where the difficulty of the game goes down over time. And it's just weird. Then again, I did break it through my own means, like, for example, mastery of the combat, and a lot of energy drinks. See, the game can allow you to carry a lot of healing items, and they can range from meh to, oh Jesus Christ, that's the good stuff. It's essentially a free regen whenever you want with no downside, and you can bring them to bosses, and honestly, there are 2 bosses where I said to myself, I don't feel bad about doing this. If you feel like I am trivializing the combat a bit, in a sense I am, but at the same time I don't see the problem because they allow me, so I honestly don't care that much. But you see, it did lead me to notice one of the odder issues with the game. So you see, remember those forums I mentioned ago? Let's actually go back to them and actually elaborate what's wrong with them. You see, for example, Beast Style is very useless except in situations where he can't do something. Because he's not really good against bosses because he can be easily interrupted and a lot of enemies have super armor. Super armor is a gameplay term that basically means while you're still taking the damage, or they can still do their attack. Which means a lot of times Beast Style just became useless just because of that. Since you do need to respond in the moment. Though then again, they did kind of supplement this with the ability to change your form whenever you want at times. It's just that I didn't realize that much, but at the same time, it's still an issue. But then again, like I mentioned, Beast Style is slow, so that means it can actually be easily interrupted when it does its attack. Which means I just don't want to deal with that, because why use something that can be so easily stopped? Brawler and Rush don't suffer this due to being just at least faster enough to just do something, though Rush suffers from the ability of not dealing damage that well. Thus, Brawler became my standard, with Rush just being more for bosses and just dodging in and out. And I didn't use Dragon Style mostly because of the chore to get it to be functional. Because, again, for the most part, it's useless till near the end game, but by then, you don't know how to properly use it and how to use it to its best effect. But you see, here's the weird thing. It's not even to say it wasn't fun. I was having fun. It's just that I noticed it, and once I started to notice it, it became harder to not notice and just kind of play around it. But I mean, like, when you're in the thick of battle, it's fun. You feel like Kiryu, a Yakuza who can beat down anyone in front of him, and having to use some tactics at times just to survive a fight. Plus, with throwing out some cool heat moves and just doing whatever, it's always fun to do. And that's why in my mind, it will always be better than Sleeping Dogs, because it's all about what you can do. Basically, in that game, you had very little choices, but here, you have too many choices, if anything. That last part is a bit joking, but I mean it when you have so many options that they can blur together, and sometimes they can feel a bit forced at times. Like, a normal player might not even see a third of all the heat moves and all the abilities you've given them, due to, again, how the game is designed, and it can't really assume that you're gonna get those moves. But having the option to have those moves is always a good thing. Heck, most normal players, if we're talking about the rest of the series here too, might not want to even do that many fights depending on how they go throughout the game, because a good chunk of players will just want to do the side activities first. Yeah, you see, a lot of people make the joke that no one cares about the main plot, which I know it's half-hearted because the plots are still really, really good, and most people would agree that the plots are good. They just sometimes want to focus on other things at times, which is again, fair enough. And I mean, like, it is really helped with all the activities being really fun to do, like Pocket Circuit, which is actually pulled from, well, Yakuza 0. But it's still enjoyable and has its own fun to it. Or heck, maybe do some regular-ass gambling with Chohan, Koi Koi, or hell, Shogi, and maybe the mythical Mahjong. I don't know what that is, but it sounds fun and maybe should have been in another game. Like, seriously, the amount of side stuff to do in these games is a lot, and I really can't blame people for getting distracted by it. And really, overall, while the gameplay is a bit flawed at times, and I mean super flawed, there's still enough good in there that should be fun for anyone to play. But now it is time to actually wrap up the plot and talk about some of the issues I did really want to address with this game. So, time to simplify the plot. So after the funeral, he decides to visit his old haunt, Serenade, and tries to find out what the hell happened to Yumi since he has no idea where she is. Reina's not sure either, but she does know Mizuki, who was Yumi's unknown sister, we'll get into that, and actually worked for her for a while, until she started her own bar with no idea where it is, but someone at Bacchus might know where she is. However, when we reach it, everyone inside is already dead. Really begs the question of why no one has called the cops already or have came here, unless they really did it like a minute ago. Anyway, he actually finds a small girl named Haruka looking for her mother. Her mother happens to be Mizuki. She even knows how to get to the bar in the Millennium Tower. There, we find a picture of Mizuki, who looks like Yumi, though with a tattoo on. However, then suddenly, the Omni Alliance comes in. Okay, it's time to elaborate. So, the Omni Alliance is some other group, not the Tojo, but another Tojo-like group. The game never explains it, and it just says, oh, the Omni Alliance. Like we know there's a difference. And it's weird how they don't actually use the future games to actually kind of solve some plot points, because here in the original, you wouldn't know that this guy is working for some other group inside the Omni Alliance that the Omni Alliance doesn't want to do. Just so we're clear. And really, they could have done this for the game to try to tighten up some plot points so that they make more sense. In any case, the Omni Alliance is after Haruka, but they don't really give an answer for why, as we fend them off. With little answers as to what to do now, Date decides to say, hey, maybe go to the florist. The florist was an old cop, a really dirty cop, who was treating info and what pretty much disappeared after he got revealed as, well, a dirty cop. His base, Purgatory, is actually under the park of a homeless shelter. Well, I say shelter, but it's more like where the homeless live because there's nowhere else. And he also uses the homeless to gain info from everyone else because nobody would think, oh yeah, this homeless guy, he's no one. When we reach him, he basically says, alright, I'll tell you, but I need some money, you know, all that good stuff. So he decides to enter the arena, where people go to watch people beat the shit out of each other, because, you know, that's something a lot of people do like to see. Fun fact, a lot of the movesets in this arena is actually full of characters' movesets from the other games. It's really interesting in a way. And actually, a lot of bosses in this game actually reuse a lot of assets from the past game, which I am both neutral on. Well, I think it is a problem that they couldn't have made some movesets for this game, for the bosses. It is still a good fight overall, so mulligan on my terms. After a heavy beatdown of some foes, we are then told some things, though most of it is just a recap of what we already know. But they do add some details. For example, Sarah was likely killed by Nishiki, which is weird when you really start thinking about that because as a plot point, it doesn't really matter or go anywhere, except in a subplot, but that's about it. In fact, speaking of those sub-stories for a moment, there's a sub-story where you meet the wife of Dojima. It kind of is a bit sad because Kiryu can't tell her what really happened and a lot of other stuff, but the point being is, this seems like an important thing that should have been in the main plot, but isn't, because this scene will get referenced in the sequel. In any case, he also referenced the fact that the Tojo thinks that Yumi and Mizuki stole the 10 billion from the Tojo. And strangely enough, when we mention Haruka, he mentioned someone was actually looking for her. But since there was no real way to tell who she was, he couldn't really tell her anything because, you know, I need to know who you are, or else, what's the point? However, as we are speaking, Majima during that time has actually kidnapped Haruka. Why? He just wants to fight Kiryu. Yeah, you see how the Majima Everywhere system kind of ruins this fight? Because basically it just makes him a boss, even though, again, we've been fighting him constantly. In any case, after the fight, Haruka actually tells Kiryu about the pendant. The pendant is somehow tied to all this, with being told by some guy. Who it is won't become important till later, with also mentioning it's worth 10 billion yen. However, bad news comes in through Date through his connection to the police. Mizuki is dead, and Kiryu at the moment doesn't have the heart to tell Haruka about it. However, they do find a lead that could lead them up to what happened to Mizuki, with the tattoo on her being tied to someone Kiryu knows. However, that goes nowhere. However, Nishiki does call him and tell him that they should meet up. However, Haruka learns that basically Kiryu went behind her back to find information about her mother on his own, when she thought they were together on this. She leaves in a huff after thinking Kiryu's only after the 10 billion, doesn't really give a shit, and leaves. However, during this time she gets captured by a secret military group that Date will decide to investigate on his own, since he's been noticing some people have been trying to stop him from whatever he's doing. However, after quickly rescuing Haruka, he decides to actually tell her what's up, and the reason why he didn't tell her. But they quickly make up and hang out for a little bit before meeting up with Nishiki. And this is where I'm gonna have to talk about a lot of different things, so I apologize if I'm pausing for a reason, it's just that there's a lot. So, speaking on Nishiki, on a purely storytelling level of just this game, and I mean the original, I'm sorry about that, he's kind of a boring villain. Yeah, he's your brother, well, Kyodai, but my point still stands, he's very little developed. And there's very little things about him that make him very interesting as a character. And mind you, I am talking about the original. And before somebody mentions Zero, well, we'll need to talk about this now. Kiwami doesn't give a crap about Zero. Yes, I am being 100% serious here when I say Kiwami does not care about Zero, nor do any of the other games after this. Well, I mean like in that weird sense, because it's hard to elaborate. You see, one of the problems with a prequel in general is that it can never truly interact with what we know now. I mean, that time Kiryu was a real estate agent doesn't really matter to any of the plot points or become a part of him, or even any of the events in that game become important to him now. Because to give you a good example of what I'm talking about is Nishiki. Because in Zero, Nishiki betrayed the clan to protect his brother, and he pretty much helped defeat a major clan, so you'd think he would have some clout to him. But no, because again, when the original game was made, Zero was never even a thought in anyone's mind. Now granted, do you think Kiwami should have bothered to at least tie in Zero's events into itself? I mean, in some regard, maybe make some more sense of certain plot points, but then again, that feels like a weird thing to do because of, well, what the original game was. Because of all intents and purposes, this is his beginning journey. Zero is just something that exists just because, in my opinion. And mind you, that's not to say that Zero is bad. I think Zero is great. It's better than Kiwami. Though I say that out loud, I'll need to actually elaborate more on that in time when I get to Zero. But my point stands that Kiwami doesn't care about Zero, nor do any of the other games after Kiwami. Well, except the sub-stories, but those are sub-stories. However, Kiwami did add something into it to try to elaborate on certain things without Zero, because again, it wants to be standalone because again, it can't rely on Zero, because that would be a weird way to remake a game. And that was by introducing the fall of Nishiki. Basically, it tries to elaborate on how he fell. And in my opinion, it worked. I felt like it could have been better paced in some regard, though that's a whole other thing. Essentially, Nishiki fell into jealousy of Kiryu because everyone keeps talking about, oh wow, Kiryu's so awesome, guys. Like, if only Kiryu was around. And really, Nishiki was falling behind because without his brother to kind of back him up, he was kind of always a bit of a weirdo. And only reason why he ever got his own family was because, oh well, Kazuma thought it would be a good idea so that way Kiryu can come back to the Yakuza through unnatural means with Nishiki. However, that created problems. Because Nishiki didn't make his own family, it means everyone doesn't really give a shit about him. And everyone's very disloyal to him. And it's not helped with his sister Yuki. Okay, seriously, to this day, I still don't understand why they kept her around in the remake. Seriously, she does nothing for the plot. She could have been removed and replaced with someone else or something, and it wouldn't really change the plot that much. And I mean, like, it still works in showing about how Nishiki fell, it's just that, it relies on a character you don't know about. But I've been going off topic for a while, so let's continue the plot a bit. So anyway, Nishiki's like, okay, look, bro, I still like you and all. We can still work together, man. All you need to do is just give me the pendant. And Kiryu's like, I can't do that, man. That's the only thing she has left of her mother. In fact, how the hell did her mother get to that? Where basically Nishiki elaborates that it was his fault, but not entirely because it was his guy's fault, and he really didn't want that to happen. Which is weird when you think about it, because you would think he would, do it himself. But whatever. Nishiki then reminisces on the past a bit about, and always remembering why everyone always liked Kiryu, because of that honor he has. And now he kinda then reveals that he's actually been betraying them both. Both Kiryu on the day he left him behind during the shooting of Dojima, and Kazuma when he shot him. I don't know why Nishiki told him that. It really doesn't make any amount of sense because of, his backstory with Kazuma, so whatever. Kiryu then just punches him out and says, get the hell out of here, with Nishiki saying, I'm going to rise to the top of my own way. And all that sort of, feel for the final fight and all that junk. Also during all this, Haruka gets kidnapped again. First time's the charm and all that. But this time, it's all through a gang who are just being paid off by Kong Long, the Flower Triad gang. Now, why the heck would the Triad give a crap about this? Well, basically, he thinks that if he gets the 10 billion, or at least helps Shimano get the 10 billion, he'll basically be allowed to do a lot more stuff in Kamurocho. However, if I know anything about Shimano, that's never gonna happen. However, we also learn Torada is involved in all this too. We'll get back to him again. I promise there's a lot more we need to talk about him later. So after defeating Kong Long, and basically rescuing Haruka again, the police now all of a sudden decides to arrest Kiryu for kidnapping Haruka. Yeah, again, it's about that weird subplot in the game where the police are kind of wanting Date to stop doing this. Where Date's like, no, I'm gonna rescue him and get them the heck out. And during this time, when they're trying to escape, a car chase happens, and where I need to mention something weird. So for those who don't know, I've been doing the PC version, if you haven't noticed. Essentially, why I did the PC version than my PS4 version, well, that's just because it runs better on there, and also because I wanted to record on my PC. It's just easier at times. However, this car chase is really, really hard. When I say hard, there are guides out there trying to help people get through this. However, most of them are for the PC version, which really confuses me because of one little thing that a lot of people forget. You see, the game was designed for a controller. However, it was never designed for a mouse. Yes, seriously, if you use your mouse, it actually makes the game, or at least this minigame, far easier, and baseball. It's really weird when I found that out. That was actually kind of cool. After the car chase, we go back to Purgatory to learn some info, and Kiryu has to confirm a suspicion he's had for a while. Basically, Reina has been selling them out for a long time. However, after learning Nishiki was involved with Mizuki's death, it was the final straw for her. Basically, she decides to try to kill Nishiki, however, it fails. And well, Shinji, trying to help Reina, tries to escape, but he also died, which is really sad in a way. But I'm kind of like in that middle group of where I'm like, oh, I'm sad, but at the same time, it's like, that's sad of empathetic sad than sad for these characters, in a way, you know what I mean? In any case, Shinji, before he died, told him that only one other person knows where Kazuma is. She's in the soapland of Shangri-La. So Kiryu and Haruka, because Kiryu's weird like that sometimes, don't ask me, go there and try to find her. Then all of a sudden, Majima comes in, says like, oh yeah, I'm here to fight you again. Oh yeah, I know, I got stabbed once. Oh yeah, but actually, let's mention this because I know a lot of people mention it. It's still fucking stupid. So basically, the Majima Everywhere system kind of had to require that Majima be everywhere for the most part. However, at one point, Majima has to kind of like get wounded again. So they made up this one situation where he gets shot. Okay? Just because they want to have the Majima Everywhere system. And really, again, there's a simple solution for the Majima Everywhere system. It would have been just like, I don't know, have the Colosseum be like this thing where everyone kind of just tried to chase Kiryu after becoming the ringleader or something, and just keep fighting him throughout the entire game. Now that would have been interesting. But in any case, after telling us where, well, again, Kazuma is, we go there and we find Torada. Yeah, you see, this entire time, Torada has been working with Kazuma throughout this entire thing. And really, I only have one big question that really gets into my mindset because of things I already know about the future games, and maybe one more. Okay, here's the question. Why did Torada tell Nishiki about the 10 billion? See, I only have a problem with this plot point is because it doesn't make any sense when you really start thinking about it. So, okay, one person might say, well, because he's a part of the Jingwan and telling Nishiki would help the fall of, well, the Tojo clan. And again, that's a whole other plot point in the second game. We'll get to it some other day. But my point is that, well, for one, that wasn't a part of this game until that game happened. But even then, even if we took that into consideration, the better question is, why didn't Kazuma say to Torada and ask, hey, why did you tell Nishiki? Because it would kinda harm Kazuma, which Kazuma would be like, okay, what the heck? And I mean, like, there is the idea that he thinks Kazuma is too trusting, thus why he thought he could get away with it. But still, I would have just liked a better explanation in general. Actually, if he really wanted to mess with the Tojo and make sure that nobody knows he was involved, all he would have to do is kill Kazuma, and if he still has that bond or debt to him, like, I'm pretty sure killing the Tojo would be the ultimate betrayal, is all I'm saying. Anyway, Kazuma then tries to elaborate on what the hell has been happening. So, okay, Mizuki, she's not dead. In fact, there is no Mizuki. She's actually an alias for Yumi. So, let me elaborate. So, Kazuma was like, okay, after all this, we need to get Yumi away from all this nonsense. So Kazuma changed her name and just hid her around, until she fell in love with a politician named Jingu. They then have a kid named Haruka. Yes, our Haruka. However, something bad happened. You see, Jingu decided to marry this girl from this one guy because of a political marriage, which is just weird that's a thing still. Anyway, Yumi decided to help Jingu for some reason, even though he's a backstabbing piece of shit who would turn down a good, healthy relationship for power. So fuck him. Anyway, decided to go off and raise Haruka on her own. However, because of how Jingu got his power, basically he's trying to make sure nobody can really destroy it. Thus, almost having Sarah, the chairman, kill her. But Kazuma was able to kind of like stop all that and actually have Yumi remember everything beforehand. It's really complicated, don't worry about it. But now you're wondering, okay, but what the hell does this have to do with the 10 billion yen? Well, that's actually the thing. The money isn't actually stolen from the Tojo, it's actually money from Jingu that was laundered to the Tojo. And basically, Sarah, Kazuma, and Yumi decided to say screw Jingu, and basically stole the money from him, so that they could get him out in the open and kill him. However, all of a sudden, Shimano comes in and it's like, ha ha! I'm gonna kill y'all and take the money. But he's easily defeated, but not before he kills Kazuma. Kazuma then reveals to him about, like, he's the actual killer of all their family because, well, he was a hitman for the Tojo. Sunflower was an atonement for him. But Kiryu doesn't really care because, one, he didn't actually know them. And really, two, Kazuma was a good person in the end. Even through all the terrible things he did. And now it's time for the final showdown. Kiryu goes up the Millennium Tower with Haruka, where they meet up with Yumi. It's a very nice reunion scene, it does its job very well. Then we meet Jingu. And Jingu, like I said with Nishiki, Jingu is kind of a boring villain. He's only introduced now as an idea. So it's kind of weird that we actually have to fight him at the end when he's not that interesting. But in any case, what was Jingu's plan? Well, you see, he knew that Sarah was always going to betray him. So he thought that basically kill him, then name whoever was the fourth chairman, so that he could have control over the Tojo. That's the idea. However, there was a snag. You see, Sarah already did have an appointment for who would be the fourth chairman, and he left that to Kazuma. And Kazuma, though unknowingly not knowing the consequence of this action, wrote down on the will to name Kiryu the fourth chairman of the Tojo clan. Also, Date's over there saying like, Jingu, we're gonna have to arrest you, as Jingu keeps shooting him, showing evidence of like, yeah, he's about right. But in any case, after one of the worst boss fight in the game, yeah, I didn't mention this, this boss fight, plus this one red-coated asshole, have guns. Now, if you don't know why that's an issue, guns hurt. Like, they really, really do. Oh god, they hurt. But the problem is that, basically, they're designed in such a way where you can't actually fight them. And it's really annoying. To this day, I don't know why they were designed like this. In any case, after defeating him, Nishiki comes in. Kiryu then tries to explain to Nishiki that he was just using him. But Nishiki already knew. Yeah, Nishiki knew the entire time. And the only reason why he did this, all of this, was to surpass Kiryu. Everyone kept looking at him and saying, Kiryu's better. And that really does tear him up inside. Yumi tries to change him back to where he was, but it's already too late. One little thing that I really did like about something, and I really want you to all know this. Did you know that the necklace that Yumi's wearing is actually also retconned, well, with the ring scene, to have been given to Yumi by Nishiki, and she still wears it? I think that's an interesting aspect to the entire thing. It's just something interesting I noticed, and it's really cool about that sort of thing, but in any case. But now it's too late. They both need to fight. And it's actually pretty alright, and I kind of broke it with the Tiger Drop. Oh yeah, let me explain. You see, Komaki is someone who will teach you moves in the game. But if you get the Tiger Drop, you beat the game because it's literally one of the best moves in the entire series because you can deal an insane amount of damage for little to no cost. After that, Yumi reveals where the 10 billion was and places a bomb near it. However, Jingu comes back in, shoots Kiryu a bit, almost kills Yumi, fatally wounding her. However, this gets Nishiki really mad because even after all this, he still loves Yumi. But also because he can't let it happen. Even after all the shit they went through, he still won't let it. And the words that Yumi told him come into fruition, choosing his own way. Thus, he shoots the bomb, killing both Jingu and him, blowing up a hole in the Millennium Tower and sending the 10 billion down to the world. Its effects will be felt throughout the entire series, as we'll see in time. After the fact, Kiryu runs out of the Tojo headquarters, deciding to name Torada as the 5th chairman, which again will have many consequences throughout the entire series. However, Kiryu doesn't care at the moment. Right now, he needs to look after Haruka, because right now, that was Yumi's last request, and he will honor that request. As much as I've said a lot of negative things about this game, god damn it, I still love this game. Yes, the story at times is a bit flawed at times. The gameplay is a bit worse than 0. But it's still good. It tells a good story, has good characters, the gameplay's still fine, the graphics are still fine, the music still good, really good. I didn't mention that. I'm sorry, I'm just not used to talking about music, even though I am actually music literate. But in any case, next time we'll do Hi-Fi Rush, which will actually force me to actually talk about the music.